Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Route Select podcast, where we talk about furry visual novels and their development. My name is Brick, I'm the developer of Silverstone, and I'm an assistant writer on Cleaved. Now, so far with this podcast, we've talked to creators who've primarily worked on longer projects. Bowser has chord progressions, Leo had Undefeated, and Faintly is currently working on Under Heaven. What many people don't realize, however, is that many people get their start with game jams, and today I'm here with someone who's entered many a jam and won the overall ranking for Mayewolf 2025. Everyone welcome ErebusWulfe. Hello Erebus, would you like to introduce yourself and what projects you worked on?
Hi, thanks for having me, and hello everyone. My name is Erebus. I've been making visual novels for a few years, since 2023, and yeah, most of them are game jam entries. So, starting from Mayewolf 2023, I created Moonlit Field, and then the next year on Mayewolf 2024, I made One More Light. Spooktober 2024, I created Phantom Echoes, and November 2024, I got Blackout 0, and finally the latest one on Mayewolf 2025, I created Geiger. And aside from making visual novels, I sometimes also make rent by coding script and assets for free for other game developers. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to start off with the icebreaker question that I've been asking everyone. Who is your current furry crush? It does not have to be from a VN. It can be any piece of media.
I think it's Roderick from Limits and also Ranzo from Downtime.
Oh yeah, those are good choices.
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely both of them.
Yeah. Alright, so you and I both have gotten our start with Mayewolf, though you were a year before me because you did Moonlit Field. Would you like to talk about how you approach making a game jam VN and like your roles in certain visual novels? Because I know some of them you do the writing and the coding, and some you've just been kind of like an assistant.
Right. So for most of my projects, I mostly do all of things from drawing the assets, background, sprites, whatever, and then also making the UI, as well as coding and also writing the story. The approach you said. Well, I don't know, I don't think there is a very specific approach other than just try to fit in with the theme of the game jam and also set your boundaries for the story, because game jams, they have a very strict time limit, so you have to somehow make it work within that time. So yeah, you should balance between what you want and what you are able to do.
Yeah, for sure. I know like some people, including myself, they kind of start the process early, like they have a story in mind before the theme's even announced. And sometimes that is able to work, but a lot of times it can harm the eventual novel if you decide to go with that. Or it can cause like a frenzy if you try to make up something like super quickly.
Yeah, for sure. I know that some people have stories in their mind for quite a while and they're just like need an excuse to somehow put it into a medium like visual novels, for example.
Yeah. I think with Silverstone the morning after, I think doing it in Mayewolf was a good idea, but I think I definitely ham-fisted the theme of that in. What was that, like Broken Heart or something? The theme was expanding. Oh yeah, I definitely ham-fisted that in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember it was quite a theme for a game jam and everybody was trying to be creative.
Oh yeah. And then there was also a lot of stories with Embrek.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is definitely a weird sort of balance when the theme comes out, because you have to decide what to do with that story if you already have it. I think so far though, you've been able to like make really good stories with the themes you're given.
Yeah, somehow, yeah. I don't know, maybe it's just lucky because the theme are something I'm comfortable with to write about. And I don't know, it's different from people. Each person to person tell me.
Yeah. And of course, like some game jams, they do have word limits, like Mayewolf in particular has the 25k word limit. Do you feel like having short visual novels, how do you feel like that affects the reader experience? Because there's a lot of VN readers that they like to follow stories for a particularly long time. Do you feel like there's been any difference in reception, sort of, with shorter novel?
Yeah, I think there is this perception that long ongoing stories are somehow much better because you will have to put more investments towards that, but at
Mm.
the same time, I don't think that's necessarily true because at the end of the day, you can produce project that has as much production value or even better if you can manage things properly. Like take for example in May of 2023, the winner was Before You Depart, and it's still one of my favorite VNs until now because even though it's quite short, but the story is rather deep and also the production value is quite high, surprisingly. Well, not that surprising because it has a lot of talented people making it. But anyways, it's still surprising because it only takes 30 days to produce such a project. While well, there are a lot of other ongoing or longer projects which unfortunately I say not as polished as that one. So yeah, maybe it's just the general perception that is not necessarily true.
Yeah, there are definitely like longer visual novels where I can feel there's like pacing issues and stuff like that simply because I feel like a lot of authors, they feel this need to make their novels as long as they can. And in the end, that harms their story. There is the opposite effect where a lot of people, they try to make their stories as short as they can. They like overscope in a jam and it causes the pacing to be a bit rushed. But I feel like with longer VNs, people assume longer is better because there's more content, but that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, and what's good longer content if it's just like dragging the story or maybe like there's no meaningful development or progress in the build, like yeah, it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say the name of this visual novel, but one day a bunch of people, including myself, we were in a call and we were reading this VN, and it was like 5 hours because it was over 2 days. It was like 5 hours of one dinner scene, and it was it was just really awful to read.
Oh my god, that's
But
hilarious.
it just kept
But
going yeah, it kept going in
yeah,
circles.
that's hilarious. Cause yeah, I think I can understand why that happened. Because sometimes as a writer, you just want to pour everything from your head into reality.
Yeah,
Like there is no breaks or there's no constraints to limit what you should do.
yeah.
Because it's just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it, and that's what happens with a lot of longer projects, I think.
Yeah, this is something a lot of visual novel authors need to learn, especially early on, is you do need to kill your darlings sometimes.
Hmm.
While we're on the topic of storytelling, actually, you often tackle I don't want to say very dark themes, but there are definitely dark themes in your novels,
Hmm.
particularly One More Light and Geiger, because One More Light, it's very much about depression and suicide, and Geiger has a lot of PTSD in it. I want to know, how do you approach writing VNs as a medium?
I believe everyone can write any story they want, but for me, a good story is one that leaves an impact, whether positive or negative. That's what I want to create because when we make a project like visual novels, it's no longer just a story we write and read ourselves. It becomes something that's consumed and experienced by others. And we as humans, we tend to connect more strongly to negative experiences than positive ones, maybe because bad moments often shape our lives significantly in some ways. And yeah, I think since all of us are, at the end of the day, we are all just flawed beings in some ways. And I'd like to take that darker energy and spin it into something more hopeful through my writing. It's not really difficult for me to find these themes because I used to work as a social worker before. So yeah, I've witnessed a lot of not so good stories in real life. And yeah, through fiction, I wish to bring those struggles to light and give them a different and more meaningful resolution, if you will.
Yeah, and I think it definitely does reach the audience really well in an impactful way. Like with Geiger, someone very close to me, they, I believe, fought in the Vietnam War, and that hit me a lot because I knew someone like that. And of course, One More Light, I think that affects many people in the furry fandom because whether people like to hear it or not, a lot of the reason people enter the fandom in the first place is due to identity and mental struggles. So I feel like things like One More Light and Blackout Zero, like they can definitely relate to the protagonists in that.
Yeah, like I've said before, those kind of uncomfortable topics, maybe not as many people will relate to them, but if you do relate to them, it will push something inside you. And speaking as a creator in general, you would want that kind of reaction from people because that means they will recognize your work better than just like, just general audience that has no deep impression to your work.
I think like more lighter visual novels definitely have their place, but I do think we're in a good era right now because a lot of VNs are starting to push a lot of boundaries. Of course, there's the current situation going on with payment processors, but
Yes.
like I feel like the fact we're in a fandom that isn't afraid to touch upon darker subjects or more taboo subjects is freeing, and in a way it can be helpful even.
Yeah, for sure. Because at the end of the day, stories are also one way for you to escape the reality in a way, and saying that something that cannot be a shift in the real world happens somewhere else, that will give you hopes and that will give you the push to move forward.
Yeah, I think like lighter visual novels for escapism are definitely good, but there are some times where pushing yourself might be the better option. One way you're actually able to convey these themes isn't even just narratively, it's visually, because you have a very good eye for user interface UI. And I mean, you even coded the instant GUI customizer. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Instant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people underestimate like just how important a UI can be in a visual novel. Cause there's some visual novels where they just use the regular Ren'Py text box, and that can completely take you out of the story sometimes. I think even with things like Tennis, if Tennis didn't have that UI, I think it would have a bit less of an identity. So what do you think about the importance of UI in visual novels?
I think UI in general it's kind of overlooked sometimes for developers, but at the end of the day, it's one of the core visuals that readers always see on the screen, and because of that, if your UI for some reason does not vibe with the overall stories that you're telling, or maybe like you have pretty basic UI when you have pretty CGs, or like the sprites are good looking but the UI are still default renty ones, it's sometimes it can be an ick for some people, or some people will just think like, I wish the production values are pretty even, those kind of things, those kind of thoughts. People will think like that sometimes. Actually, just like any other visual elements, you can somewhat channel storytelling through your GUI. For example, in Geiger, I don't know if most people realize it, but when you hover over the buttons, it actually will play one tick of the Geiger detector sound.
Oh,
The real one.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, it's small things like that that will make people excited and interested, and that in the end will result in them to be more appreciative of your work, and they will enjoy your stories better.
Yeah, I feel like the default Ren'Py UI can be used in a good way. Like some males have been able to use that to like tell really funny stories and kind of use that as a bit of a sort of aid to it. But there are definitely good stories as well where they have the Ren'Py UI. And I feel bad that a lot of people just click off because they feel like, oh, because it doesn't have that, it's completely shit. And I do hope in time more people can and realize the importance of UI, but at the same time respect stories for what they are as well.
Yeah, for sure, because it's one of the first thing that people would notice, and first impressions are always important, and sometimes it can be the one thing that determine whether people would like to stick to your project or not. I know it's silly, but it is what it is. It's kind of like when you're browsing for movies, you would want to watch the trailer or maybe like the cover of the film first. If you're not interested from saying it at the glance, then you will probably not gonna click on them and watch the movies.
Yeah, for sure. I think a very good comparison of how UI can affect like the overall perception of a story is actually between my visual novels, Silverstone, The Morning After, and just regular Silverstone. The Morning After, it has like a very cartoony, almost dating sim UI, and
Yes, kinda, yes.
that was one of the major complaints about that, and I completely see where people are coming from because at the end of the day, it is a horror romance VN, and
Yep.
the UI did not show that whatsoever. So when it came to Silverstone, I took into account not only the genre, but the place, the characters, everything involved, and it came up with this like very woody, foresty like UI because it takes place in Oregon, and Oregon has that. But forest, like wood UIs can also invoke like backwoods horror almost.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where if it works, people would maybe not really notice it, but if it doesn't work, people will notice it and criticize it.
Yeah, for sure. While we're on topic of Maywolves, One More Light came out the same time as Silverstone the Morning After did, but it does have a sequel, which is Blackout Zero. But if I'm correct, you did not come up with a story for that, right? That was Nefarious?
No, that's still mainly my stories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got a little bit of assistance in general, but yeah.
Do you want to talk about kind of the difference between working on One More Light versus Blackout Zero because of that influence?
Right, yeah, for sure. So, One More Light is more or less the stories that I'm comfortable with writing because, in general, the theme and the vibe they are more like slow, grounded, and more realistic day-to-day life things that's happening.
Mm.
Whereas in the Blackout Zero, it's completely different because it's mostly focused on actions. And as a writer, I just want to explore different things, and that's why I move away from my comfort zones and try to make a new one. And thankfully, people still like it, even though it's a completely different genre that I write that I'm comfortable with. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good experience. And for One More Light than Blackout Zero specifically, both were actually heavily influenced by music. Well, I don't know if a lot of people realize it, but both of them they actually reference Linkin Park's song. It's my favorite band. So with One More Light, I tried to capture the somber and fleeting feeling of the song and its message that everyone matters. It's actually a very sentimental project to me because, well, the song itself is just heavy. Chester, the vocalist of the band, unfortunately, he took his own life not long after the release of the album, and the passing was just so sudden. It was heartbreaking for everyone, and yeah, it reminded me that anyone can have their vulnerable moments unexpectedly at any time. So I just wanted to echo the message of this song that everyone matters, you matter. Then with Blackout Zero, I tried to capture the chaotic vibe of the song and tried to portray how things can go from bad to worse so quickly, and then at the end I want to shift it into sort of a moment of self-reflection and catharsis, if you will. You can really tell from the story right now because the end is still unfinished, but honestly, if I have more time to work on it, I wish I could complete it soon, but it's just difficult because action scenes are very tricky to execute correctly. It's just very time consuming. I wanted to mirror that raw chaos energy before guiding the story into something more thoughtful, if you will.
Yeah, I feel like writing action in particular when it comes to visual novels is definitely a lot harder because even though we're working in a format that is visual, we still have limitations that come with that. So we often have to describe the action instead of
Yes.
actually showing it on screen. So writing a VN that is primarily in the, I'll go quote unquote action genre, I imagine there were a lot of difficulties with that.
Oh yeah, it's definitely way harder making Blackout Zero for me because, like you said, sometimes you cannot really convey action scenes with just words, so you have to somehow manage it with visuals. But at the same time, as a developer, that is a huge resource that you need just to execute one scene. And with action stories in general, of course, you're not just gonna have a singular isolated action scenes. You
Yeah.
will need multiple of them in the story. So logistically speaking, it's way more difficult to do that. And even though you can make shortcuts in some ways, still it won't be as good.
Yeah, like with the default things Rampike gives you, I believe the way most people visualize like punches and kicks and stuff is with like H punch and V punch. But a whole like visual novel where there's just a bunch of action, you cannot just do that. You have to add other things in there.
Yeah, for sure. Like, imagine if you're reading Fate series and it's just words without proper visuals for the actions. Like,
Yeah.
it won't register in your mind what's actually happening.
Oh no.
Yeah, because as a writer of the action scenes, the most fun part is the action itself. Like,
Yeah.
if they are lost to the readers, then what's the point? Like, yeah, that's a huge loss if you cannot properly convey what actions unravel in your mind to your readers.
Yeah, like when people think of things like The Matrix, they don't really think about the story and the philosophical stuff behind it. They think of Neo dodging bullets. They want to get to
Yes.
the next action scene. So doing that in a visual novel format is even harder to do.
Yeah, unless you're like a comic artist or something that's
Oh yeah.
comfortable to just pump out your assets easily. But sadly, most of us are not that kind of person.
Yeah, and writing comic panels in like May Wolf or November would be freaking hell to do. But meanwhile, while Blackout Zero is an action story, One More Light is definitely more of an intimate, introspective story because it follows the protagonist and his mental struggles throughout, I believe it's a day, and then later on it shifts to Mycroft and becomes more of a mystery than it does like action.
Yeah, well, actually, the idea of Blackout Zero comes first before One More Light. So,
Mm,
honestly, One More Light is just, you could say, an excuse of a story that I'll write so that people can relate to what the true protagonist Mycroft can actually do and how his actions can impact people around him significantly, even though it's not really a huge thing that he's done because
yeah.
of the butterfly effects that's going.
I was gonna say, like, one of the huge motifs with Mycroft is the butterfly.
Yep.
And I think the way One More Light is written, I think you did that really well because it definitely showed, like, you can help someone with just, like, a single sentence.
Yeah,
You go through this guy's whole day before you even get to Mycroft.
that's my main interpretation of the theme expanding, actually, which
Yeah.
for some reason most of the people don't realize that even though it's the very first scene happening, the butterfly, the butterfly scene, just like it's kind of subtle. It's kind of subtle if you don't notice it, but yeah, the main idea is that people's lives are entangled in the web of fate, and one small actions can have a ripple effects to someone else's life.
Yeah, and I definitely think showing what would happen if Mycroft didn't intervene gets the idea across, because I feel like when a lot of people, they see a scene like when Mycroft talks to Mikkel, they kind of feel like it's a Saturday morning special almost. But the fact that you intimately show Mikkel's day, it makes what Mycroft does come across even harder. And in a way, it connects people to both of the protagonists, because there are many people dealing with suicidal ideation that can relate to Mikkel. And then there are people that want to help others and can relate to Mycroft.
Well, the story definitely would not be as interesting if I write it from Mycroft's perspective. Mainly because for Mycroft, it really is just like a random encounter. He saw a guy struggling. Oh, he's depressed and he's about to meet his Zen soon. But Mycroft thought, well, that's not really fair. Maybe I can do something about it. But at the end of the day, it's not really affecting him at all.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, so there is no stakes, no impact whatsoever for him. So it wouldn't be as interesting. But for the whole narrative, it's important to show how small things like that, his actions can do much bigger and significant impact to someone else's.
So we've been talking about like your shorter entries for a while now, but this year's Maywolf was Geiger, which you plan on expanding into a longer entry, correct?
Not really that long, but you could say the Game Jam version is like 60%, 70% of the whole story that I originally planned. But yeah.
Can you tell us how working on the remainder of Geiger, I'll say, how has that been compared to the 30-day limit you're usually given?
Right, so for some reason, I struggle more when there is no strict deadline that hounds and looms over me and pushes me to do what needs to be done in regards to the game development. I think, yeah, I don't know.
I do kind of feel the same way, especially with like Silverstone. At the end of the day, though, it really just depends on how much you need to get done, your pace, all that kind of stuff. I feel like things like Maywolf and November are definitely fun challenges, but for super long projects, oftentimes you just have to do away with the deadlines.
Yeah, I think game jams are good because they give you a strict timeline, so you have to plan things accordingly and you have to somehow push yourself more. But outside of the game jams, when you have the luxury to do whatever you like, whatever you please, there is no pressure that pushes you to do more, I guess, because at the end of the day, making visual novels, writing stories, they are like hobbies to you. So you just want to do it when you are in the mood to do it and when you want to do it, rather than in the game jams, you somehow feel more obliged to do that.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing I wish I had taken advantage of was the morning after finished relatively early in May of 2024. I wish I had taken the extra days to polish it up a bit.
Yeah, there is that feeling of not wanting to disappoint people in some ways when you're in a game jam. Even though you know that at the end of the day it's just for fun, but yeah, there is still that pressure looming over you.
Yeah, game jams are definitely a good way to enter the furry visual novel world and to just get started in general, but you shouldn't worry too much about what you're doing, because if you focus too much on like production value and things like that, I feel like you are going to set yourself to trip yourself up.
Yeah, I say it's a good opportunity to weigh what you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
And what you want and learn the ropes in general.
Yeah. I was surprised that I got a little over 18,000 words done within that time span. I must have been on something when I wrote that.
Maybe. Yeah, it's just sometimes some days you just have that kind of inspiration and bam, you can write like 5k words, 10k words in a single sitting or something like that. Maybe it's because you manifested for some reason, like I have to do it within this month, so I have to somehow think harder or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, it might have been that pressure for sure. I did it in the worst way possible though. Let me just say for people who want to enter the VN space, when you write your story, don't do it straight into VS Code. Do it in a different program first.
I actually still do that.
Oh no.
I actually still do that because,
Oh.
well, to each their own, I guess. As long as it works, it doesn't matter.
I do think there might be some benefits to it, especially like if you have an editor and want to share it through GitHub or something. But I wasn't really doing it in that I would write it all and then code it. I was doing it at the same time, which
Yeah, obviously it's not a good thing to do because for editorial purposes, you obviously cannot do it properly when you write your story directly
yeah.
into your code. But when you're in the time pressure, you just do whatever you gotta do.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to November coming up because that'll be my first game jam since 2024. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens then.
Yeah, I'm also interested on it, but I'm not sure. I know some people would hit me if I don't finish Geiger first before making another project.
Yeah, that's just unfortunate. That's the VN
Yeah.
world. Are there any tips that you would give new visual novel creators that are coming into the FVN space through game jams or anything like that?
Right. So I think my biggest suggestion that I can give is that don't compare yourself to successful projects because behind the scenes there must have been a lot going on with them that we simply don't know. And when we compare our progress with them, it will just take your joy away from the creation process, and also it will just most of the time will just harm you in various other ways, because at the end of the day comparison is the thief of joy. So you shouldn't compare yourself too much, because visual novel development for most people, it's only supposed to be their hobbies. So what's good is a hobby if it's not longer enjoyable for you?
Yeah, I feel like there's this misconception that the big visual novel creators are just swimming in wealth from Patreon and Subscribestar. Most of them, they still have their regular jobs because visual novels aren't as lucrative as people think they are.
Oh yeah, definitely. You have to pour so much resources if you really want a good quality project, and it's just not sustainable if you just throw your life away for it.
Yeah, like I think even like stuff like Echo Project, they make quite a bit of money, but that money, it just goes towards paying for art and things like that. That doesn't go into their actual like pockets to spend on like cars and things like that. That's purely for the sake of developing more of the visual novel.
Yeah, and their journey is definitely not a smooth one. So
No.
no, it's pretty on the outside, but not really.
But yeah, if you compare yourself to novels like Ad Astra or Burroughs or Remember the Flowers and try to separate yourself as much as you can from them, that is not going to help whatsoever. It'll probably hurt it more than help. And it's like, hey, if your visual novel, it has wolf guys in space and Ad Astra has wolf guys in space, okay, they both have wolf guys in space, so what?
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you remember this, but you remember when the first time Soul Break came out, and a lot of people kinda hated it simply because of the amnesia human main character. Yeah, that was surprise. Well, it's not surprising. Insane how a lot of people gave it a side eye simply because of that cliche. But I'm just glad at the end of the day it turned out to be way better than people initially expected. But what I want to say is that if you have a story in mind, just be confident about it and don't pay too much negative remarks from other people. But it doesn't mean that you should never hear any kind of criticism.
Yeah, like constructive criticism is definitely important to look at. It's mostly just like, this is kind of a new term, but deconstructive criticism is what you want to avoid.
Yeah, it's definitely different from each person, but yeah, the point is you should find the balance between not listening to other people and to actually listen to their thoughts about your works.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you're not going into a game jam with a big team like Remember the Flowers. You're usually going to be 1 to 3 people at most, usually.
Yeah, I mean, you could, but it's just
You
not
could.
realistic to, you could, just like the Before You Depart thing, but realistically speaking, that's not gonna be trend or the common thing happening in a game jam.
Yeah. So, what got you interested into joining game jams in the first place?
So basically, I always liked writing stories, and at that time in 2023, around the first time the Maywolf Game Jam happened, I thought it's an interesting opportunity to just test the waters, learn how you actually make your own visual novels, how you code in RenPy, how you create and manage your assets, stuff like that.
Mm.
Yeah, so for me, it's basically just out of curiosity at first. But then after that, I also joined the next year's Maywolves, October, and also November. I joined them simply because I want to keep progressing. I want to learn more and develop my skills. And actually, I think game jams are a good excuse for me to finally do something seriously. And yeah, it's a good and enjoyable time of the year where I can just channel out my creative ideas.
Yeah, for sure. Find it interesting you didn't have any coding experience before 2023.
I mean, I'm used to code in MATLAB, but it's entirely different with coding in RenPy.
And now you've been helping with UI and stuff like that.
Yes, it's always interesting how I keep finding new stuff to learn from RenPy, mainly because I keep having new ideas that I want to figure out how to execute them properly in RenPy, and the other half is simply because the RenPy documentation sucks. So I have to learn and experiment myself.
Oh yeah, I remember I had to code something for Silverstone and the documentation said to do the exact opposite.
It's awful, really awful.
Yeah.
If there is no one to help you, it's really an awful experience, but it is what it is.
Yeah, there's something I have to code soon, and I cannot find anything on how to code it on Lemisoft or on the documentation. It's a learning
Yeah,
curve.
it is. It's just funny how RenPy is basically your go-to choice if you want to make a visual novel because
Yeah.
its barrier of entry is very minimal. But once you want to do a lot with your project, it gets way more complicated and very
Oh yeah.
not straightforward at all.
Yeah, especially with things like ATL and things like that.
Yeah, it still baffles me how RenPy needs a whole language for the main script and another new one when you're doing the screen. Like, it's a whole new language, kind of.
Yeah. For those who don't code, ATL basically stands for Animation and Transformation Language. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a very simplified term for what it covers.
Oh yeah, that's extremely simplified. But yeah, we have one final question for you. This is usually what if your visual novel started development in 2025, but considering your backlog, I'm going to change it up a bit. If you could remake any of your novels in 2025, what would it be? Like if there was something you could do differently with it.
Well, alright, since the question is for my own project, I honestly do not want to majorly remake any of them. Maybe just polishing and, like editorial stuff. And then maybe just a little bit tweak on the UI, but that's pretty much it. The reason is that for me personally, all of my projects starting from 2023, they're kind of like the proof of how I have progressed each time. So in a way, I do not want to change it because it's just a reflection of who I was as a creator. So I wouldn't have it in any other way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely get what you mean. I actually really like that answer. Yeah, when you look back at your work, it's like, I feel like a lot of people, they look back and they go, oh, I don't like that. I also feel that way. But at the end of the day, it is a part of your journey and how far you've come.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe one of the reasons is also because most of my projects are not that big in scope. So yeah, I don't really regret writing any parts from them at all because yeah, it's just short stories. What do you expect from short stories? It's not like I'm writing a massive hundreds of thousands of words of material, you know.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's been lovely having you, Erebus. Thank you for coming on. Would you like to share with the audience where they can find your socials and your games?
Right, you can find me, ErebusWulfe, on Blue Sky and itch.io. I sometimes post the progress of my projects on Blue Sky or maybe just occasional arts, and I'll post all my game builds on itch.io. Actually, I am in the process of making Patreon right
Oh,
now
yeah.
because, with the stuff that's going on, I need somewhere more secure to upload not safe for builds. And yeah, pattern this new home.
And I will make sure that once those are up, I will add them into the description. If they are already up, of course, I'll add them right away. But yeah, so next week we will be talking to another wolf. We will be talking to S. Anima of Moon Touched fame. I hope you all have a good day, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for having me.